Hi, I'm Owen, the host of the Australian Finance Podcast. This podcast is proudly sponsored by BetaShares, one of the leading providers of ETFs here in Australia. Serving thousands of financial advisors and over 1 million investors, BetaShares manages tens of billions of dollars on behalf of investors right across the country. I'm proud to partner with BetaShares on the Australian Finance Podcast, Australia's premier financial podcast, because there is great alignment in the long-term philosophy shared by both businesses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
So welcome, Tracy, to the Australian Finance Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So we were talking a few weeks ago about your amazing book that's out and lots of things coming up. And I reached out to you and was like, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? I think it would be really interesting for people to hear about your story. And then we talked for like an hour and a half, just could not stop yapping. So I thought this will definitely go well and all flow well. But yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, really well.
Yes, very excited. And we're in Sydney in person, which is so good because we were talking about you coming to Melbourne.
Yes, I thought I was going to Melbourne, so I almost booked a flight. And then here we are.
Well, this worked out really, really well.
So much more. It's just easier for me here.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about your amazing journey, what you have recovered, rebuilt, and just it's such a fascinating story. But I guess we have to acknowledge how it all started first. So for those listeners out there, you may have heard of a podcast by The Australian called Who the Hell is Hamish? So this is how I know of your story, and then was so excited to see that you've got a book so that we can learn more about your story and your recovery. But for anyone that's not listening, do you want to explain to them what this is about?
Absolutely. Well, back in 2016, it was early 2016, and I'd been separated from my husband for just over a year. I was working a really big job at eBay in the city in Sydney. I was getting my head around single parenting my 5-year-old, just getting back on top of things, I think it's fair to say. And I decided that I wanted to start dating again. And so I did what everyone generally does now, especially when you're in your 40s, you go on the dating apps. And I came across a man by the name of Max Tavita, and we connected, we clicked, and we started a relationship which went on for nearly 18 months. He lived in Bondi, so he was sort of on the other side of the city, but it was very much an in real life relationship. We went on holidays together. He met my family. We were talking about our future together, buying property, and all the things you talk about when you're in a serious relationship. And he told me he was a chief investment officer for a family office and worked in finance. He told me he had a sort of a 20-year career in corporate finance in New York, worked on Wall Street, and many, many other stories and conversations about finance and investments and his line of work. And it wasn't until mid-July 2017, so nearly 18 months later, that I woke up one morning to a Crime Stoppers video online of him being arrested outside of his Bondi Beach apartment. And his face was all blurred out, but of course I knew that it was him. And only I found out very soon after that his name wasn't Max Tavita. He was in fact Hamish McLaren, who is one of Australia's most prolific conmen, and he had swindled 15 victims out of $7.6 million. He had stolen $317,000 from me, and in those moments thereafter, that's when my life pretty much came crashing down around me.
It's absolutely astonishing, right? And your book goes into a lot of detail because the podcast episode that made this story really well known is very much about his crimes, all of that kind of thing. But your book's amazing, and you talk about the before Hamish, during and after, which I love. And there's something that you say in your book about connecting the dots, because one thing that I think lots of people will be thinking is, how did you not know, or were there red flags? We do just really believe people when they are giving us information on their expertise. And did you have any reason to not trust him?
No, we are actually, as humans, biologically wired to trust. It's what kept us safe. It's what kept us in community. It's what kept us, alive back in the day. And so biologically, we're actually wired to trust. And so when you meet somebody and they say, "Hi, my name's Gemma Mitchell," I don't question that. I don't go, hey, I need 100 points of ID before I'm going any further. I mean, maybe I kind of think like that now. But of course, when someone says, my name is Max Tavita, I'm a chief investment officer for a family office, you don't question that because, of course, when you don't suspect somebody is lying or being dishonest, you don't question it. And then that's where it all started. And then it just sort of snowballed from there. And I do think it's interesting because everyone wants to know what the red flags are. And of course, in retrospect, you can connect those dots and you can see them. But sometimes I get a bit frustrated because if they were big, blaring red flags in front of my face, I wouldn't have done what I did. I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in. They're beige flags at best. But yes, in retrospect, there are a lot of things. He didn't have a digital footprint. He was very, very hesitant for me to meet friends and family and for him to meet certain friends of mine. He was quirky in some senses. The stories he told were big stories. And but I guess at the time it just all sort of made sense. He was very, very good at lengthy explanations that had me believe. And the lies were so big that I didn't even question them.
Yeah, well, it's like if he goes into so much detail, I guess you go, wow, they really know this story and you're not questioning it. But also you kind of be like, well, why lie? Why lie? Like you wouldn't be really thinking.
No. And when the majority of the world and the majority of your world are good people, and they are, 95, 98% of people in this world are inherently good. You don't suspect that that person that you're sharing a bed with or spending your weekends with is part of that 2%. And, Hamish was an outlier, right? He was operating at a very, very sophisticated level of psychopathic behavior. But, no, you don't expect that. But if you say to somebody, hey, how come you don't have a LinkedIn profile? That's really weird. And you get a response that's not as simple as, hey, I don't believe in LinkedIn. I like to fly under the radar. My job doesn't want me to be profiled. If you got something as simple as that, you'd go, oh, that's a bit weird. But when you get the monologue that goes on for minutes and minutes and minutes about why there is no profile, what the history of that is, and, the lecture about surely that you're the product, and, all the conspiracy theory around it and just this long-winded explanation, you start to go, okay, well, wow, he's really got a point of view about this and he's really thought about it. And, it's just crazy when I look back now, but it wasn't as simple as, oh, I don't believe in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It was much more detailed. And you have to remember that every conversation, every story was like this. And then if you went back to it, it all matched.
Yeah.
So you just don't suspect.
And he was an expert. Otherwise, this was a profession. He had this down to a fine art. You weren't the first.
No.
So he had mastered all of this to make sure that you were going to trust him. He knew what worked.
He'd been doing this job for the better part of 20 or 30 years. This is a man that's never had another job in his life. His job is to find ways to take money from people.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so you mentioned that when you found out that he got arrested, you had 317,000 of your life savings gone. Yeah, and so how did that come about? So I really want to focus on you rebuilding because it's just such an amazing story. But just for the listeners who haven't listened to the podcast yet and haven't read your book yet, which I absolutely recommend, it's amazing. How did that physical loss of money happen?
The majority of the money was lost through him sort of convincing, grooming and guiding me to set up a self-managed super fund. So, and that came after, again, many, many conversations and quite a way into our relationship. So he would talk about things like, how much money are you paying in fees? And, those fundies, they're thieves. They don't work hard for your money. You should see what I'm earning for the family office clients. A lot of discussion like this. So over a long period of time, he had sort of groomed me to a point where he had me believe that he was a great person to help with my investments and my superannuation and convinced me to set up a self-managed super fund. So I'd been working at that stage for 22 years in corporate marketing. So I had almost, $200,000 in superannuation. I probably could have had more. If I'm honest, now I know what I know. But that was a substantial amount of money, and we set it up legitimately. All the documentation was correct. The bank accounts were correct. Everything was in my name because he had, of course, guided me through that. And then there were some other portions of money, like I had received some stocks for working in tech, so some RSUs, so employee stock units and things like that. So he had encouraged me to sell those and put those in as well. And he was going to invest that money for me on my behalf, as he did for the family office clients, in a trading account. And the bit where it all went wrong is the trading account that I thought was set up in my name, because I'd done the forms, I'd provided the documentation, the identification documents, the whole thing. The money didn't end up going into an account in my name. It went into an account of his. So that was all falsified.
So it was only that small piece of the puzzle. So everything else was really legitimate. So that makes you trust him even more.
Yeah, I mean, I had everything I needed to take 22 years worth of career superannuation and put it into a self-managed super fund. Now, that is not something you can do particularly easily. You have to have the right documentation. You have to have the right constitutions. You need the director's signature. It needed to be set up properly, and I understood part of that, but he would sort of, groomed me through that whole process, really, knowing what he needed to provide for me to get the money, to extract the money from my regulated superannuation fund. And so that was all legitimate. It was the part where the money in that new legitimate self-managed super fund was going to be invested in a trading account, which I believed was in my name, but in fact it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I understand, well, actually one thing that from reading your book that kind of, I should know this. I've been a financial advisor for 15 years. But one thing I was a light bulb moment for me was when you talk about, it's not just that the money's gone, but all of these things then happen. There was a criminal investigation, but you were dealing with the ATO because of tax returns. And then you needed to deal with the super fund because it was non-complying. So yes, there's the fraud gone, but there's all these other layers of just stuff you have to fix and deal with. When I kind of just imagined, this is naive, but you just kind of wash your hands of it and go, right, it's a criminal investigation. Now, hopefully I get money back. But there's stuff that you just have to keep doing on top of rebuilding.
Yeah. This is the thing, money impacts and affects so many areas of your life. And he was sort of had his fingers in a lot of it when it came to me. Of course, I trusted him. I thought he had my best interests at heart. And I thought he loved me. So that was just sort of the way we were building our relationship. And he told me he was a professional. So, there were a lot of things he was helping me with. So one of them was a tax return. So he offered one time to help me with my tax return. Now, when you're a single mum and you're working 16-hour days and you've got a lot of responsibility and you are tired and you are stretched and you are all the things, if someone offers to help you and you think they're a professional at what they're doing, I was grateful. I was like, oh my God, he sees me. He sees how hard I'm working. He sees how hard I'm trying and he wants to help me. So he did that. But of course, when it all came tumbling down, I had to think about all the things that had to do with my money and all of that setup that he had his sticky fingers on. And I didn't want to be in any more trouble because I already knew I had a non-compliant superannuation fund. So I had to contact the right people and unwind that and do all the paperwork to do that. And that, of course, I'd never done that before. So that took a lot. I was working with the police solidly for more than 3 weeks on my statement. So they had 15 victims, but they were asking me everything from where did you go on your date? What did you eat on that date? Where did you park the car? Who paid? Provide all the text messages, provide all of the phone calls, the documentation, the false reports, every look, every glance. I literally had to unpick 18 months of my life and go through every piece of evidence I had that is exactly what happened, because fraud is actually pretty difficult to prosecute. Because on paper and at a surface level, I freely gave him money. it was under deceit, it was under deception, it was under all of those things. But fraud is really, really difficult to prosecute. So they needed everything I could gather, and they were doing that for all of the victims. So I was doing that. I had a job that I had to get back to because I had lost everything. I had nothing apart from my monthly income, and I was single parenting a 6-year-old who was at daycare. So I was so scared I would lose my job, and had I lost my financial, like my job, I would have lost my only financial lifeline. And I write about this in the book that not long before he was arrested, I'd had a particularly hard day at work, and I must have been whinging and moaning about it. I was probably just really tired. And he said to me, Trace, let me put $1 million in your bank account tomorrow. You can leave work. You can go and figure out what it is that you want to do. You can do this brand stuff, marketing stuff, speaking stuff, whatever you want to do. Go and spend some time thinking about it and coming up with a plan, and you don't have to worry about working. And, you can pay me back. I know you feel funny if it was just a gift. And for a very hot minute, it was very tempting to say yes. In that moment, I was like, that actually would be great. But I've always worked. I've always had my own independence with money in terms of working and having a career. And I said, look, I'm probably just tired. I'll be fine tomorrow. Now, had I have done that, had I have taken his offer, and had I have left my job, and this all unraveled less than 2 months after, I really would have been in a hole, because my job was my only financial lifeline.
You'd be looking for work, losing that money to other victims, if you even got the money.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to look for work while you're doing a criminal investigation, while you're doing all of this. And you're dealing with heartbreak.
Yeah.
You loved this person. And so I can't even imagine.
So
there's so many
grateful.
layers.
Yeah. I feel so grateful that I had my job. But what that meant was I was scared I was going to lose it. And so I doubled down. I worked harder than I've ever worked. But it was also a great distraction, because I had a team of people at work. I had to get into the city every day. And while I was working, I wasn't thinking about the fact that this had happened. And, the other great distraction was my child. And she didn't really care what was going on. I mean, she didn't know. I made that decision, no tears at the dinner table, very early on. She was 6, and I couldn't really explain to her a non-compliant superannuation fund and a criminal ex-boyfriend. It was very difficult. So I just shielded her from everything. And that was a fantastic distraction because we just got on with life, and I had to hide a lot of it from her. So that just meant I would just sort of, put on my big girl pants and just pressed on. And then there were things like having to get really smart really quickly about my money.
Yes. And that's one thing that I absolutely love about your story is that you took so much initiative straight away. You took ownership of it, and you were like, right, what do we need to change? So I would love to hear about your rebuilding story. But one thing I know that you got help, and I'm interested to see how hard it was to ask for help and trust people in that rebuilding after this.
Yeah, I knew that to get back on top of things, I did need help, because in those sort of weeks, months, and quite frankly, years after he was arrested, and I was still really struggling emotionally, psychologically, mentally, with everything, it wasn't the fact that I couldn't trust other people. I worked that out pretty quickly. It was the fact that I couldn't trust myself to make big decisions. And I'd lost confidence in my own ability to make the right decisions. And so I knew that I needed somebody to help me, and I needed a plan, because the biggest thing I was doing was just getting out of bed every day, if I'm honest, and getting my kid to school and getting myself into the office to work. And if I could do those things, I knew I had income. The rest of it was just too much. And so I knew that I needed somebody to help me. So I got 3 recommendations of financial advisors, and I went and met all of them. I spoke in detail about what had happened to me, what I wanted to do, where I wanted my life to go. I needed a vision, because I was in a hole. And I then went and got references from them, and I deeply looked at them, #stalked them on the internet, and I called up people who were clients of theirs and I got references. Like, I was so scared. And I ended up meeting this woman who's still my financial advisor today, and she's just the most incredible woman. She was an angel at the time, and she didn't sort of ask me like all the technical questions that can feel quite overwhelming because often we don't understand the language or the structure of things or whatever. She said to me, "What do you want your life to look like in 2, 5, and 10 years' time from now?" And, you know, I'm bawling my eyes out because I'm thinking I can't even think what my life looks like tomorrow. But we sat there and she was really patient and we mapped it all out and we came up with a plan. I'm pretty disciplined. I did what we agreed, and I automated a lot of it because, again, I didn't have the mental capacity to be thinking about it all the time. And, you know, slowly but surely we worked through it. And, you know, she literally held me by the hand and guided me through and said, "You're going to be okay." And with that, I had some hope. I had some hope that I was going to get out of it. And, you know, she's still my financial planner today. She is amazing. The thing that I didn't realize about financial planning and wealth creation, or even just having a structure and a strategy, was it's so much more than just your income and investments and things. You know, I had to think about, you know, rebuilding my superannuation and what that plan was. So she helped me with that, and she, you know, informed me on all the other strategies I could do to maximize my super for the rest of my working career, which is never going to be enough for me to retire on. So then we had to come up with a secondary strategy for, you know, for my retirement. And then we talked about my will and power of attorney and my beneficiaries. And she helped me through all of the things that just take that pressure, that financial mental load off me, so that everything's in place now and I don't have to worry.
And so much of it, like, I think people think seeing a financial planner is they're going to be very judgy, or like they're going to have to explain like why they've made these decisions, and it's all going to be, I guess, quite confronting. But a lot of the time it's empowering, and it's looking at, well, what are your goals and what do you want life to look like you said. And it's also not just the strategy. I find it's the mindset and the, yes, you can do this, and why are you doing it, and what are you adding, not losing, like, and just all of the in between that's outside of the, well, this is a great super strategy. There's just so much to it. So finding that relationship and having somebody that you can trust, that you feel like a team. I love how you went about finding an advisor.
I kind of had to. I just didn't trust enough. But yeah, exactly. And thinking about future me, you know, financial issues for me were always a future me problem. Like, it was a future me thing to solve. It was always on my to-do list, but it was always the last thing I got to. And working with her and the modeling that is done to kind of help you get to vision out what your life is going to be. And are you happy with that? Or do you need to come up with more? Or do you need to be more innovative? Or do you want to save more? Do you want to invest more? Do you want to earn more? Do you want to spend more? All of those questions modeled out actually gives you a vision of future you. And I think we all have a vision of what we want our lives to be in the future. Some are inflated, I think. But that just helped me visualize it and come up with a plan. And I think, you know, a plan is never a bad thing. And, you know, and the plan over the last year, the plan has changed a few times because we meet regularly, more in the first few years than we do now, because it was sort of we're pretty bedded down now. But, you know, my jobs might have changed, and therefore we would remodel and we would rechat and we would rethink about the future, and we would, you know, come up with new ideas or change things slightly. But yeah, she's just fantastic. And I do, you know, one of my biggest regrets, I guess, is that I didn't have someone like her in my life when Hamish came into my life, because had I have had her, I would have bounced the ideas that he was presenting to me off her, or I would have had to have, you know, at least, I guess, communicated with her what I was doing, because it was the flow of money. And she would have seen things that I didn't.
But also maybe he would have just known that, like found out that you had an advisor and it would be off the table and you would have gone on a couple of dates and off, you know,
potentially.
You wouldn't, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, he may have been wanting to talk his way around it. And, you know, of course, it's always the individual's decision what they do with their money. But I do know, and I feel more secure and protected now because I've got her as a sounding board. And, you know, anything that comes up, even if I get something in an email about an insurance or something, I'll flick it to her and I'll say, hey, you know, is this legit? Do I need to fill these forms in? I'm not quite sure what this means. And that's the other thing about finding somebody to support you, whether it's a money coach or, you know, a financial advisor, is not feeling inadequate in asking questions, because I fully appreciate that financial advice is not accessible for everybody, either from a financial point of view or from a, you know, just the language is hard. You know, that it's almost on purpose made difficult so that, you know, we have to pay someone lots of money to help us with it. And I understand it's all regulated and all the other things, but, you know, I never feel embarrassed asking her a question. If there's anything I'm not sure of, I ask. And that in itself is just such a comforting thing, especially for women, I think, because we are led to believe that we're not as good at money as our male partners or counterparts, you know, girl math and all of the other crazy kind of systemic things that we've been brought up with. And, you know, I've really probably learnt the hard way that, you know, it's really important to have that support person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like anyone can take from this that you don't have to go through such a devastating, and I hope people don't, but you can like rebuild, reset your finances, change your financial path at any time. It's about knowing what you can do yourself and what you can outsource, and making sure you've got the right team like supporting you.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't have to be swindled by a con man and lose your life savings to be financially vulnerable. You know, we know through divorce, women are incredibly vulnerable. We know that women over the age of 55 are the biggest cohort, or the growing cohort of women who are homeless because of these circumstantial things. The death of a partner can leave you very financially vulnerable. And if you are not leaning into your finances and taking agency, extreme agency, then you are leaving yourself vulnerable, whether you're in a loving partnership or not. And that's one of the things that I love talking to women about is just, you know, and it doesn't have to be the full shebang. Just do one thing. Get on top of your super. Next time, get on top of your insurances. Get on top of your, you know, whatever it is you need to do to get through your financial to-do list. Lean in and take an agency, because it is very easy to lean back. We have a lot on our plate already, and quite often, you know, and this is exactly what I did with Hamish. I didn't think hard enough and critically enough about the information he was presenting to me and the fact that he was offering to help me. I felt grateful. I felt seen. I felt like he knew how hard I was trying and he just wanted to make things better for me. That's how I felt. But in retrospect, I should have given him the laundry. I should have given him the after-school pickup. I should not have given him my finances. And that is the lesson that I had to learn the hard way, but the one that I try and talk to women about, especially in terms of just getting a little bit more on top of things.
Yeah. And one of the things I love, a saying I love, is you can outsource the execution, but not the understanding. And it's like, yeah, as you said, like even a healthy relationship, usually the finance or, you know, different roles in a household fall on different people. And it's absolutely fine for somebody to take the lead for their everyday stuff. But both people have to have full access and understanding and all of that type of stuff, because it protects them, but it also means that you're working as a team. And it, like, obviously Hamish wanted all of the control, but from like my perspective, I was the person that managed money in my family, and it's a lot of pressure as well. So it doesn't have to be just from a safety perspective. It absolutely should. But the other element is you want to be a team and both be supporting each other in these kind of goals and the responsibility it is to manage money.
Yeah. I was doing a keynote at a corporate in Sydney last year, and I talk a lot about, do you both have the logins to your investments and your accounts? Do you know how much your super? I do a little bit of a sense check on where people are, financially vigilant or financially vulnerable. And it really is just a kind of a self-reflection moment in the keynote. And at the end of the talk, this gentleman came up to me and he said to me, I've just realized that my wife doesn't have the login to our investments and I feel about it. And I said, okay, well, that's a conversation for you to have with her tonight. And a lot of the times we just sort of fall into these roles, and it's not through ill intent. It is not through deception. But he said to me, if for 1 minute she even had a thought that put her at risk, that makes me not feel great. If at any moment I got critically ill or died, that makes me feel sick. And he just had this stark realization that it was just it just happened. And they hadn't really thought about it and they hadn't discussed it. And he never wanted his wife to feel that vulnerable. And so even just in that moment, I was so glad we'd had that conversation. And it just highlights the fact that, it's not always deception. It's not always divorce. It can be really unfortunate events like major illness, death, or anything can happen. We don't know what's going to hit us. But if we're not on top of our finances, then it makes it even harder when it does.
Yeah, and finances, a stressful situation like any of those is made so much more stressful when you don't have access to resources like emergency funds, income, all of that type of stuff. It's just so important.
Yeah.
So tell us more about the work that you're doing now. So you've rebuilt your finances by working with a financial advisor. You've done amazing things. You've got your book and it's changed your career, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I had 25 years in corporate marketing, mainly with big US tech companies, which I absolutely love. So after Hamish was arrested, I spent another sort of 6-7 years with my head down and my bum up, just working really hard. And then I wrote the book in 2023 when I was working full time, and it was released in May last year, 2024. And at that time, I was being asked to speak, do a lot of media. People were really asking for insights, and so I decided to leave corporate marketing and, set up a business to educate, advocate and support people who may have been victim survivors of fraud, but mainly to educate people on this world of scams and fraud that is, I call it a scamdemic. There is not one day that goes past where we are not being targeted by scams and fraud. So my main aim is to educate people using my story and my experience, but also to advocate on behalf of victims that don't feel comfortable expressing their scam story, and then work with governments and organisations on solutions to create change.
So I love how you talk about advocating for people that don't feel comfortable with sharing their stories and all of that kind of thing. There's such an emotional layer that comes with this. Yes, you need to get practical and rebuild like you did, and you got so on top of that straight away. But I can imagine, people really struggling with that. Can you talk about what the hardest part for you and, the people that you work with, what is that? Because it's outside of just the financial aspect.
Very rarely is the money lost the hardest thing that people will have to deal with. I mean, money is important. Money gives us choices. Yes, all of those things. But, generally we can rebuild, we can work hard, we can come up with ways to earn money. The psychological and the emotional impact of being betrayed and scammed and defrauded is profound. And quite often it's not spoken about enough. So I will go and talk at a financial crime summit or a cyber summit or something like that. And you have a room full of professionals and organisation and government there that are working so incredibly hard to solve this problem. There is money, there is resources, there is AI, there's technology, there is everything being thrown at this problem. And quite often I'm the only human voice in the room. And I'm glad about that, because if it wasn't for me, there would be no human voice in the room. And what I like to do is remind people that, yes, those conversations are important and we need those resources. We need the technology. We need the money. We need the people to solve this problem. But we cannot forget that at the center of this are humans, and humans whose lives have been impacted in profound ways and devastated and flattened by the greed of others. And some of these people, unfortunately, never recover. Some people choose to end their lives. And what I like to do is remind people that there are humans at the center, and the emotional and psychological impact of being scammed or defrauded is so deep and so layered. There is obviously the physical impact where people will not eat, they will not sleep. For example, I lost 6 kilos in 3 weeks after this happened, and I'm not a big human. It's kind of hard for me to lose 6 kilos. Like, you know, it affects you in ways: anxiety, depression, loss of appetite, loss of sleep, isolation, loneliness. And, you know, shame is a huge, huge emotion that people feel. And a lot of people won't come forward and tell their stories because they are embarrassed, because they are ashamed. They're also worried about reputational risk, career, you know, setbacks. They might not want to relive the trauma. And all of those things are very fair. But how can you solve the problem if you don't have the full picture? And the ACCC tell us that 30% of scams and fraud are not reported currently. I personally think it's a lot higher than that. So we've got this big black hole of information from people who are too embarrassed and too ashamed to come forward. So that's why I speak up so loudly, really on behalf of them. You know, I had to go to therapy for years. I've done every modality under the sun to rid this experience of my existence, of my body, of my mind. And it is still something that I work on, you know, every day. But there are people that don't have access to those resources. And one of the things I advocate for is victim support. Because the truth is, if you are a victim of a violent crime, if someone breaks into your house and puts a gun to your head, you get victim support, you get psychological support, you probably even get some money, you know, if you can't work or whatever. If you're a victim of financial crime, that doesn't exist, because the weapons are psychological. They are not guns and knives. They are psychological weapons that are used against us. And what people don't understand is that you are a victim of crime. You know, these are criminals that are taking your money, and even the language, because, you know, even the language of scams, it sounds a little bit like fun, doesn't it? Little scam. Whereas
little game.
It's fraud. It is financial crime. And the majority of people losing money to scams and fraud right now in the world have been targeted by international criminal syndicates that are operating at a sophistication level that is beyond anything we can imagine. The AI technology coming out of these criminal scammer farms is said to be 2 years ahead of any government agency in the world. So we are struggling to keep up. But what we don't understand is the tactics they're using. They're undetectable because they're psychological.
Yeah. We don't know what we don't know, right? Which is the scary part of it.
Yeah. And they leverage trust, and they leverage emotion, and what they try and do, and this is what I try and educate people on. It's not the scam that we need to learn about. Oh, it's a romance scam, or it's a phishing scam, or an SMS scam. It is the fact that a scammer will try and get you into a heightened emotional state so that you have less access to your logical thinking. And the heightened emotional states are typically love in romance scams, fear, oh my God, Mum, I've lost my phone, I need you to do this or whatever.
I've seen the videos and the like the voice recording, and they actually sound like the kids. And yeah, I think if my mum got one of those, she wouldn't even think twice. She'd be
100%.
Like, oh, so Gemma's got a new number and we'll do that.
Yeah, so it's real-time voice cloning. There is, the other emotions that they try and elicit are hope, and also excitement.
And you were thankful, like, as you said, you were just so relieved for somebody to be helping you with these things that,
and so all of these emotions are elicited through long conversations and interactions and psychological tactics that are undetectable. And because we're human, we're going to be vulnerable. And our vulnerabilities make us targets. And interestingly, people think, oh, you know, it's when you're lonely, middle-aged and sitting in your lounge room looking for love. That's when you're vulnerable. That's when you're going to be targeted. But vulnerability happens every day, every week, every month of our lives. We might be busy and just don't have our mind switched onto that thing at that moment. We might be hungover because we had a big night last night. We might be traveling.
Or if you're really driven, like imagine you being like, I've got this big financial goal. Here's somebody who's going to help me achieve it. It's not desperation. It's not loneliness. It's I'm really motivated to make these amazing things happen. Like there are so many stages in your life where like if all of them could be turned on you, I guess, is the scary thing here.
And that's the thing we need to be aware of, not the fact it's a romance scam or a phishing scam. And these are the vulnerabilities that a scammer or fraudster or someone taking advantage of you to extract money or data will, hone in on. And they're professionals at this. And this is what Hamish did as well. He was very, very good at finding people's, I put in inverted commas, but weak spot, the thing that motivates them, the thing that they want the most in their life. And it's not always what you think it is, so it's really important for us to be aware of that but also be aware of the people closest to us, being aware of that as well, because, when you're wearing your rose-colored glasses, all the red flags are just flags. And it's the people beside us that can see the things that we don't see, especially when we're falling in love.
Absolutely. I love that they're all rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
They're just flags.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah. For anything in your life, you want it to be the way you want it to be. So it's, our brains are fundamentally glitchy when it comes to our biases. I had so many biases when it came to Hamish. We have this thing, it's the similarity bias. So that is basically what says, if someone looks, sounds, wants the same things as you, does the same things as you, has your similar interests, has similar values and morals, and is reflective of you, you are more likely to trust and fall in love with them. Now, all Hamish had to do was listen to what I wanted for my life, reflect that back to me in the form of Max Tavita, which he did, and he knew I'd fall in love with him. And I did, because I thought, oh my God, here is someone I can spend my life with. We are on the same page, so it's things like that. There's, I have an optimism bias. So I naturally think the best of situations. I don't go into situations thinking someone is out to fool me. And of course, that was taken advantage of. There are so many biases that we have that put us in a vulnerable position. Now, these are just natural things. It's biology, but it's interesting when you start to unpick, the price of trust and how that all fits together.
Yeah, and it's not that you need to rewrite these biases. Like, it's more being aware of them, right? So that you are aware of when they are making the decisions and when you are from a practical and well-informed kind of place.
Yeah. And it's kind of the things I like to say, like there's a lot of little catch cries I've got, like trust but verify.
I love that.
Be skeptical, not cynical.
Mm-hmm.
Be vigilant, not vulnerable. And there are these little things that I have in my head now that, because I find it hard to trust things now. I'm much more skeptical, but I like to think that I'm still open and I do trust what is presented to me, but I do always verify it.
I love that.
Always verify.
So 2 questions before we wrap up. First one is, so you hid this from your daughter initially, no tears at the dinner table. Is she now at an age where you have started talking to her? Is she fully aware of it? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so she's nearly 15 now. So at the time she was 6. So big difference in age and
she's
comprehension of the world.
In some interviews as well.
Yeah, I mean, she went through the process of me writing the book. She didn't really know what the book was about. She obviously understood that Hamish was in jail. She didn't ask about him for a very long time after he was arrested, like 9 months or something.
Well, she lost a big part of her life as well because they had a relationship.
Ish, but not really.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so the majority of the time I spent with him was when she was with her dad. So he was on the phone a lot. That was the relationship they had. And we took a few family holidays together. But, it wasn't until 9 months later, after he was arrested, one night she said to me, "Oh, Mum, we haven't heard from Max in a while." And literally,
wow, really?
That was the first time she'd mentioned it. And I just internally giggled and thought, yeah, well, I've hid that well. You've done well, Trace.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But yeah, so she's 15, nearly 15 now. She's read part of the book. I'm just letting her read it in her own time. She's obviously seen my interviews. She's come along to media things. She's come along to keynotes with me. I'm a single mum. She's got to kind of come with me where I go. And she's heard me talk, and she knows she's comprehending it at the rate that she can.
Age appropriate.
But it's interesting because her and her friends are obviously very digitally attached, and Snapchat is their platform of choice, and I'm constantly having conversation with her and her mates about who they are accepting as friends and where these people fit into their friend group, and how do they actually know that it's a 15-year-old girl who lives locally or a 15-year-old boy who goes to this school. And they quite often are naive in their beliefs that those people are who they say they are. And whilst I don't want to scare the bejesus out of them, I think my book is a cautionary tale. My experience is a cautionary tale that people are not always who they say they are, and to be very, very careful and to meet people in real life, and, don't believe everything you see through a profile online.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such an important message for them to learn at this age, because they'll be able to apply it to so many areas. So the other one that I have is, what is the most rewarding part of this very, very painful chapter of your life?
Gosh.
If we have to think of the silver lining.
The silver lining. Do you know, people ask me whether I regret putting up my dating app, my profile on the dating app back in 2016. And I genuinely don't. Do I regret losing the money? Yeah, I do. Like, life has been really a lot in the last 8 years. But I don't regret the experience, because without it, I wouldn't have, the wisdom that I have today, or the compassion that I have, or the empathy. I wouldn't have ever imagined I was strong enough to get through something like this. And I mean, you've read the book, and without any spoilers, because I would love everyone to read the book. This wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was pretty bad. I'm not going to lie, but it wasn't the worst. But it was the hardest, because I had brought it on myself. The other things that happened to me were just things that can go,
out of your control.
Yeah, health and things like that. So, but this was a decision I made to bring this man into my life and trust him. These were all of my decisions. And I just felt that they hit me the hardest, because I thought I was smarter than that. I thought I was better than to let that happen to me. How does something like that happen to me? And we all think that.
I think we all think that.
We all think we're smarter than we are,
It's like medical things as well. Oh, that won't happen to me.
Yeah.
People getting insurance and things. Oh, that won't. We just think that, right?
Yeah.
We think we're smarter. We think that it won't happen to us.
It's not going to be me. And unfortunately, it does, and it did. And so, I don't regret the experience. I've learnt so much. I have changed careers, which I never thought I'd be doing. I am meeting the most incredible people who are doing some amazing things in the space of women and finance and, scams and fraud and all of this. I'm talking to I don't know. It's brought about so many unexpected surprises along the way. I don't know if it's the most rewarding thing. I feel like there's purpose, there's purpose to the predicament that I found myself in. And I didn't feel like that at the beginning, because, you're in
the thick of it.
You're in the thick of it. And I don't always necessarily think that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, and that's just that. But I have found purpose in the pain that I suffered, and hopefully I'm turning it into something positive and good for the world. And for me, that feels great. That feels really nice.
And you can just share your passion and the amazing things that you're doing here. It's from a really like a place that you just want to help people, and it's inspiring as well. So I'm very thankful that you put your story out there, because as you said, like not everybody is able to do that, not willing to do it. But I think it's just going to bring so much to the community of the people that are going through it, but also people just being more aware, even if they're in happy relationships, even if they're restarting, and, there's so many different things that different situations that we can take out what you've learnt.
I had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine yesterday, and she said, because of you and your story and all the things that we've spoken about, I am so much more on top of my finances and, where I'm going. And she said, I was quite happy previously to let my husband do the accountant and the tax return every year. And they're in a very happy, long, beautiful relationship. And she had no concerns whatsoever. But she said, just hearing your story and hearing what you talk about, I've taken more agency over my finances and I feel so much more secure because of that. So even just hearing that from a girlfriend, that was amazing, that phone call yesterday.
So nice. Okay, so where can people connect with you? So in the show notes, we're going to have a link to your website. You do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and socials, and I would encourage everybody to buy this book because it is great. And as I said, it's about, before and during, but after as well, which is the really inspiring stuff. So where can people connect with you? Yeah,
LinkedIn is a great place to start. Social media, Instagram is my platform of choice. And the website. And if you want to get in touch, just reach out.
So good. Is there a piece of wisdom you want to leave the audience with?
Oh, wisdom. Goodness gracious.
Put you on the spot.
It might not be a piece of wisdom, but it kind of sums up my whole experience. And it's this saying that says, women are like tea bags. You never know how strong we are until you put us in hot water. And I feel like I've been in hot water for a number of years. And I'm very, I feel like I've built some strength and some resilience. And I'm really grateful for that, because it's probably not the last time I'll go through something tough in my life. And, if I can use that to help others, then that's even better.
Well, you're amazing, very inspiring. And I loved the book. So thank you so much for coming and joining me on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.